It's a show with two retired detectives that were in the thick of New York crime, fast and hectic. They got some stories and some jokes, even an interview with the most popular folks. Off the cuff, one episode just ain't enough. Get a little laughter and an interview too. It's maybe the best thing you can do.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, Bill Cannon, and tonight with me, as on most nights, my co-host straight out of Brooklyn, Phil Grimaldi. How you doing tonight, Phil?
I'm doing good. Just made it under the wire, but yeah, I'm good.
It's been a hectic day, but I don't know if our listeners really want to hear about dishwasher, rain, and all that other stuff that affects all of us. But anyway, you know, I've been listening so much to a lot of the interaction about the Brian Laundrie death and Gabby Petito. And of course, the intrigue with this is unbelievable. And it's because there's a lot of unknowns to this. There's a lot of things that people want answers to. And right now, there are no answers. And one of them is like, why did it take so long for the police to find the body of Brian Laundrie? And I'm going to play a little clip here and just bring us back to I think it was October 22nd when they first recovered the body. So let me play this here and we'll get a better. Phil, the original question, why did it take so long for the authorities to find the body of Brian Laundrie? I'm going to give you a couple of parts to this. I'm going to let you go off. I'm going to let you do a Phil straight out of Brooklyn response to this.
Are you sure you want to do that?
Yeah, I'm sure. Part A, why did it take so long? Part B, did it seem a little suspicious that the parents, the day before, just led the police directly to where, in fact, they found his remains? Part C, are you satisfied with the odontology identification, that's the dental identification, that these body remains are, in fact, Brian Laundrie? Because there's a lot of people questioning that fact. Go ahead, Phil. Make me proud.
First up, why did it take so long for his remains to be recovered? I think if you watch that short video right in the beginning, when the officer says there was water that was chest deep, he introduced several animals. Obviously, the wildlife that's indigenous to the area could have scattered the remains. I think the real stumbling block on recovering Brian's remains was obviously the fact that there was a lot of rain in the area around the time when he went missing. It filled up that area. It's a swampy area. So I think the water was probably a big factor in that. You know, it might be easy to say, well, you know, even if he was on the water, he would have been floating, or who knows, he might have been under a branch or something like that. There's so many factors. And when you go through that type of swampland, the water is not clear. It could be beautiful, clear rainwater that falls, and within minutes, it's muck. It becomes green muck. So, bottom line, I think that's the answer to the question of why it took so long. Secondly, the parents, it probably was a little suspicious, but we had talked about there could have been a deal negotiation, negotiated between the FBI along with the attorney and the parents. We know that there was definitely some type of communication going on between them. The lawyer stated that, came right out of his mouth. So I think that there's a clear explanation for, the fact that it's not a rumor that there was a negotiation or communication going on. It was fact. So there could have been some, we won't charge you with this if you give us the information on where the body's located. I think it is quite suspicious that, that they show up and then very shortly thereafter, that the remains are recovered. Now, we don't know if they were called there, they went there, they met the FBI there. So I think that's still a little bit unclear, although it seems to be that they initiated this latest search that recovered his remains. And C, the odontologist. I mean, I have absolutely no problem with that. I think it's 100%. I mean, dental records are like a fingerprint. And if you have a professional odontologist examining the remains, which was, I believe it was the skull with the teeth intact, it's clear to see if they had Brian's dental records, which, they executed search warrants way before he was even recovered. So I'm sure that they probably were ready for that and had the dental records loaded and ready to go. And I have full and complete confidence that, yes, that was him that was identified. And I'd like to add one little thing. I guess we'll call it a D. More than likely, they did a DNA. Not even more than likely. I think 100% they did a DNA examination of the remains after the odontologist report. So that's A, B, C, and D, Bill. I gave you a D.
That's good. I didn't even ask for the D, but thank you. Yeah, I have no doubt. When I hear that there's some very suspicious people out there that are talking about conspiracy theories and all of that stuff. It was even the outrageous thing that the parents brought their own bones there. Like, come on, okay, let's stop getting ridiculous, because if you want, if you can, of course, you could buy a skull and you could probably buy a skeleton. But the thing is, the dental records, the odontology matched. And if this was going to be a conspiracy, you'd have to have at least 3 or 4 law enforcement agencies conspiring along with the dentist, along with the anthropologist, along with the pathologist to do a fake identification. There's no doubt, I believe, when the FBI and local police said, yes, the remains are in fact Brian Laundrie, I think that's 100% a hit. And the other thing is, as you said, of course they took DNA. It may not have come back yet, because guess why? They're not in a rush to get it back, because they're satisfied that the odontology examination and verification is good enough to make the identification. Now, one of the things that we spoke about, and we're going to still stay on this, what took so long for them to find his remains. And obviously, the whole thing, the water rose. And if you've been inside this Myakkahatchee Creek Reserve, it's a real like little jungle, to tell you the truth, And as you guys know, I did a little show from there on Sunday, and it is to me, it's beautiful, but at the same time, a very like scary place, realizing all the different types of animals are in there, and at least probably 10 of them could kill you. Those feral pigs, my God, those are scary animals, And then they have mountain lions, there's alligators, there's snakes, all kinds of snakes. And that, to me, makes it pretty scary. And so they didn't find him, again, because the water rose. And maybe they also didn't have the cooperation early on with the parents that they somehow were able to obtain through the FBI and through the attorney, Mr. Bertolino.
Absolutely, Bill. And I think that, there's another component there too. The fact that the family went to, his mom and dad went to the scene. They identified the items that they recovered. So you have that, you have the odontologist, we have the DNA. And I think it's quite clear that it's him. And in my opinion, it sounds like early on that he went into this area. He may have been, he may have met his ending early on. I think. I don't think that that it happened, within a short period of time from when he was found. I think it was more likely closer to, I guess it was the 13th or the 14th of September when he actually went into that area. That's what I think happened. Either he met up with some ill fate with one of the wildlife at the location, or he took his own life. I think those are the two considerations there.
Well, that was the other thing, and we're going to get into a little more of that later. Is we have the theories of how he died, and right now they're just theories, because we don't have a manner of death, and we don't have a cause of death. For folks that don't know the difference between manner of death, the manner is homicide, suicide, accidental, or natural. That's the 4 ways of the manner of death. The cause of death. It could be homicide, suicide, accidental, and or excuse me, it could be the cause of death could be blunt trauma, could be gunshot wound, could be suicide, uh, could be that animals in the reserve killed him. So we don't know, and that's the thing that's really disturbing to a lot of people is that how do we not know how he died at this point? Because I think they don't want to jump out and just make a prediction. And I think the local police did make a prediction that he committed suicide, but you can't really say that if you don't have scientific evidence of that. And if you do say that minus scientific evidence, it makes you look less than professional.
Did the local police did make a comment to that they believed he committed suicide?
Yeah, well, they were a little, they had taken a big beating, especially in regards to the surveillance and
Yes.
losing him. And so they had predicted early on that he was in the Myakkahatchee Preserve and that he, in fact, committed suicide. They predicted that. And now they were almost taking spiking the football, saying, see, we told you early on, but there still is no evidence of that. And because the body was skeletonized, and not just skeletonized, but it was scattered all over the place, and there wasn't much of the skeleton even left. It's very difficult to say, oh, yes, he committed suicide. You cannot say that with any type of scientific surety, but there's no way you can predict that.
Of course, Bill. And even if in his backpack or his, they said there was a notepad, if there even was a suicide, that still does not say 100% it was a suicide, because he could have written the note or left a message contemplating suicide. And again, the interaction with the wildlife in the area could have happened in the interim. And I think if they could prove he was killed by the wildlife, that would be considered an accidental death. You named all the different classifications, but I would just want to say that if it was, in fact, interaction with an animal, let's say a wild boar or one of these bobcats or a snake, that would be considered accidental, because it's not natural, it's not homicide. It would be considered an accidental death.
I'll tell you one thing, and through walking through that reserve with preserve, Myakkahatchee Creek, I wouldn't camp in that place in a tent if you paid me. I mean, it is that, to me, being a city boy, a suburban boy, a scary place. And unless you're some survivalist, I wouldn't feel safe camping in that location. So you really would have to be a camping aficionado and know what you're doing and know how to stay away and keep the animals away from you. And I don't know if he, in fact, had that level of expertise as a woodsman. I just don't know that.
I would think that if you were going to do that, you're going to go into that area and you were going to hide out, you'd have to be up in a tree somewhere to keep yourself safe from all the wildlife. And even then, maybe, there might be tree climbing animals that can get up to you, or snakes or something like that. So, but listen, I think it was probably fairly soon after he got into that area that he met his demise. That's what it sounds like to me, within I would say a day or two.
For sure. Another thing was, besides the skeletal evidence, and that has been identified as Brian Laundrie, there was other evidence recovered. There was a backpack and there was a notebook. Of course, everyone wants to know, what the hell was in that notebook? Is the notebook salvageable? Can you read what's in that notebook? Was there a suicide note? Did he confess to what he did in that notebook? And that's, of course, very important. But the FBI will be in no rush to release that, if they ever do.
Yeah, they probably wouldn't release it to the public. That's something that I would consider to be, something only that the family I would discuss with. Look, you're looking at a homicide investigation, a possible suicide. You're going to want to keep all of those things close to the vest, I would imagine. And I think the only people that really have the right to know if there was a suicide note and what the contents of it were would be his family, not even the Petito family. I mean, you'd probably offer to them that, yes, we believe it was a suicide. There was a note. However, we don't want to discuss unless it was pertinent to the homicide. If he said, I couldn't live with myself because I killed Gabby, then I think that they would have the right to know. But if it was something more on a personal, maybe saying goodbye to his mom or his dad or something to that effect, I would want to just, let the family know. I'd let the Petito family know, listen, there was a note. He didn't make one word mention of your daughter, but he did have, a goodbye to his family. And I wouldn't go into detail about it because those are certain elements of investigation that are really only privy to the next of kin or the family, in a case like that. Would you agree with that, Bill?
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Because if what's in that notebook has no bearing on the case, but is very private, they have really no reason to release that. Folks, if you're not subscribed to us, this is Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. Please go on our YouTube, hit that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, ring that bell. It's free to subscribe and be a member. Join the YouTube family of Police Off the Cuff. There's 5 levels: the bucket for $2.99 a month, coffee with Cannon for $6.99 a month, polish my rack for $9.99 a month, dipped in butter for $24.99, and heated dipped in butter for the premier one, $49.99 a month. But guys, just join the Police Off the Cuff family. We also have a Patreon. We really could use your your support, and believe me, if you like things from a police perspective, you're not going to get any more of a police perspective than 2 former NYPD retired detective and a sergeant. Ivan Hawthorne, I take that's a very Irish name. It's baffling to me why Brian, who was from the area, went to the reserve to hide out, given all the wildlife. He knew the area very well. He knew it was flooded or would flood. He took his own life, I think. Ivan, something I don't totally disagree with you. And I think, but until we know scientifically that that's what happened, we can't just throw it out there as in fact a truth, so we have to get scientific, and we're waiting on the anthropologists to come back and say, oh, there's bite marks from an alligator. I don't know if they in fact will be able to tell that with the sparsity of actual bones that they recovered, but if they can, that would help, a lot of people that are questioning, was it a homicide? Was it a suicide? Was it natural? Did the animals eat them? Was it accidental? People want to know, and that we may never know the answers. We may never.
Yeah, absolutely, Bill. And I think that examination of bones and fragments and things like that all is very time consuming. And it may take a very long time before they're even able to recover everything regarding his remains, and whatever they do recover. I mean, like you said, if there's some type of a bite mark, it's not going to be throughout his whole body. It's going to be generally in one area where the alligator would have grabbed and bit down and did whatever it did. So if that piece of bone fragment is not found, it's going to be difficult. And again, I think that last comment, they made some good points that, if he knew the area, why would he go there? I think that, I'm just going to spitball a little bit here. They did buy that trailer right after he got back. They took the trailer and they went out into the woods. Maybe they just felt, they were going to put the trailer in the woods and let him stay there for an extended period of time to hide out. And when they realized that people saw the trailer and they knew that they would know what to look for, that they scrapped that plan. Or else, why would they have bought that trailer as soon as he got back, and then his mom and dad decide to go off for 2 days into the woods to try out this new trailer? There was something to that. I think that's a component of this whole thing, and I think it was a plan that was hatched, and then they X'd out the plan when they realized neighbors saw us or people saw us with this trailer or where they bought it, and they just knew that it wasn't a good plan. And again, maybe he fully intended to commit suicide, didn't tell anybody, kept it to himself, said, listen, I need to get away. I'm going to go take a hike. And then he wound up committing suicide. Both of those scenarios, I think, are quite possible. Either him going into the woods and getting attacked by wildlife, or the suicide. Those are the two strongest theories that I have.
I want to ask another question. Of course, this is woulda, coulda, shoulda. But early on in the investigation, there was a bit of a ping pong match between the Northport police and the police out in Suffolk County, Long Island, over who was going to take the missing person report. Now, missing persons, most police departments, the criteria for that is the missing person report is taken in the residence of the missing person. So in our mind, she lived with the Laundries in Northport, Florida. And also in the mind of the police out on Long Island, they were saying that she didn't live there. She lived in Florida. So they didn't want to take a report. But Northport also didn't want to take the report. So it was sort of like a pissing match between these two agencies. And I think finally, the police department on Long Island, Suffolk County, took the report and referred it to Northport. Now, what that did was it made Northport be able to say, oh, we weren't the lead agency. So did that mean that you weren't jumping in there, with both feet into the water? What did that mean, that you weren't the lead agency? Because as you can recall, Brian Laundrie arrived home from Wyoming on September 1st, and Gabby wasn't reported missing till the 11th, September 11th. So a full 11 days went by. Did this pissing contest between the police departments cause this? Or what? And also the Laundries were not answering or taking calls from them. Nor was Brian. So there's a whole 11 days where this case, I question what was going on in this case during those 11 days.
I would like to know how soon after the first that Gabby's parents tried to report her missing. I would be, very interested in knowing if it was close to the first or if it was closer to the 11th. And the reason I say that is because, as the days went on, a lot of things could have transpired regarding covering up of evidence and different things like that. So I think that's a very good point that you brought up, Billy, that, there was that little ping pong match. I believe it was a detective in Suffolk County that eventually took the bull by the horns and called Northport and said, hey, this is a missing girl. They were on this, this trip throughout the country, driving through the country, and she's nowhere to be found. And he's got her van. And I think at that point, the alarm bells went off in the Northport Police Department that it was actually a legitimate missing person. And, there was obviously foul play. And that's when the whole investigation really got rolling. And that's, good for him, that detective in Suffolk County. I remember reading that a while back, that it was I think it was the detective that the family knew or reached out to. Somebody knew him and got the ball rolling. I mean, it was probably, best guesstimate, it might have only been a day or two, because I think I would be frantic if I found out all the things that they knew, that, there was no responses coming from Brian, no responses coming from his parents, no responses coming from her, no responses coming from Brian. And, I'd have been knocking on the door of the family's home at some point, if the police weren't going to help. And so I guess, there was probably a little bit of a delay. I don't know if it was from the first, but it sounds like there was definitely a little bit of I think you called it a pissing match. I think that's the right terminology.
Phil, you know something? If that was my daughter or my son and I was getting no response, guess where I would be?
Oh yeah,
I would be on a plane to Northport,
Absolutely.
Florida,
100%.
and I'd be knocking on their door with a battering ram too, not with my fist.
Yeah.
Schmitty, it makes sense that the family would not discuss anything during camping. Parents knew something. Brian was probably in panic mode and knew this was a time with the family, maybe the last time. Schmitty, you're very intuitive. I 100% agree with you. I believe that Brian told his family that he killed Gabby. That's my belief. I have no scientific evidence of that. I have no proof of that. That is my instincts, and I think they know it, and I think the attorney knows it too. And I know Joe Murray's not here because he would strenuously object to me saying that. But I think the attorney knows everything. I think he knows exactly what went down. And another thing we criticized the attorney for was, how can you represent people from 2,000 miles away? He never went to Northport, Florida. And, we can Monday morning quarterback and say, maybe if he went there and spoke to the whole family and spoke to Brian face to face, maybe he wouldn't be dead right now. And I know a lot of you people in the chat and a lot of people all over the place are happy he's dead with the thoughts that he killed Gabby. But, at least we would know the truth. And I don't understand how an attorney can represent someone from a FaceTime on a cell phone. I think you got to go there and talk to the whole person and counsel the whole person and see the whole person and interview the whole family. I don't think you can do it from FaceTime on a cell phone. Thoughts, Philly?
He may have been trying to skirt around the law because in order for him to represent Brian, he'd have to be licensed and registered to practice law in Florida. So maybe the fact that he was doing it from New York, where he is licensed, and they were just getting consultation from him. I don't know the exact letter of the law on that, but maybe he was skirting an issue that would come up if he went to Florida and said, "Hey, I'm his attorney." There's no attorney-client privilege because you're not registered as an attorney or licensed as an attorney in the state of Florida. So I don't know if that played into it. He probably, looking back, Monday morning quarterbacking, should have contacted a colleague in Florida. If he didn't know anybody, should have got a referral for an attorney in Florida because, as we said before, the parents should have been represented by an attorney as well as Brian. And I think you make the strongest point, Billy. Had he had face-to-face consultation with an attorney, maybe the attorney would have coaxed him not to go off on this hiking or said, listen, cooperate with the police. Let's, if you know what happened to her, maybe you can work something out, tell them where the body is. And, and then we're going to proceed with a criminal defense for you. And you may or may not be convicted. And if you are, maybe we can work something out with the fact that you helped recover the remains. So those are the options. I mean, Monday morning quarterback, and it's a little tough to say afterwards, but if you look back on it, I think that would be the best course of action.
100%. A sweet Melissa. I love that name. A real estate attorney can't represent the family from another state, nor could he do criminal law. I think he was more than a real estate attorney. He also did real estate, but as far as Joe Murray said that he had checked out his website and he was a criminal attorney also. But Phil may have hit the nail on the head when he said that perhaps he wasn't allowed to practice law in Florida. Then you have to speak to an associate in Florida that is licensed. And I think that through an associate's license, you could probably get around that. But I look, we all know what happened, and no one knew that this is what was going to happen. So we all have 20/20 hindsight, and that's the way it always is, Pauline Buckles, of course, what we know is Brian had no intentions of following legal advice other than to keep quiet. Well, that was the biggest legal advice that he did follow. And that's what, in fact, made it so difficult for the police to conduct this investigation. They were never allowed to interview him, nor were they allowed to interview the parents. Don't you think a good interviewer, a good investigator could have gotten to the bottom of this very quickly if they could have interviewed Brian and or including his parents? Of course. Look at Phil. Do you think you could keep the truth away from Phil Grimaldi?
No. I just want to make one comment about what Sweet Melissa said regarding the attorney. Even though he was a real estate attorney, he could still represent somebody in a criminal action. He's still licensed as an attorney. And I know how New York is. So New York State, if you're licensed as an attorney, you can also practice civil law, and you could also practice real estate law. You have to know all the components of the law, but your specialty could be real estate, or your specialty could be civil. However, if you go to a civil attorney and you confide them and tell them something, the attorney-client privilege, I think, would still be okay. You'd still be covered under the umbrella of attorney-client privilege. Would you say I'm right on that, Bill?
Absolutely. I think a lawyer, once you say you have an attorney, I don't think the police are asking you, oh, what's his license number? What's his telephone number?
Yeah.
You just invoked counsel,
right?
Whether or not, you always see on TV, a lawyer will say, give me $1, and the guy he goes, now I represent you. You show me an attorney that'll take $1 to represent you. And, But
Yeah, but
it's crazy.
the point I was trying to make is that when you pass the bar, you're a lawyer, and you become registered in let's say in the state of New York. Now you can represent all different areas of law. It doesn't have to be just. So I think that I don't know if the point she was trying to make is that a real estate attorney can't represent you on criminal, and I think he did both. From his website, Joe Murray told us that he represented some people on criminal cases, misdemeanor criminal cases, something like that. But a real estate attorney, an attorney is an attorney in New York State. I'm not going to speak about any other state because I don't really know, but I believe in most states it's all the same. An attorney's an attorney. If you invoke counsel with an attorney, you have attorney-client privilege. Anything you tell them, and then obviously you'd want an attorney who's a real estate attorney, doesn't do trials, doesn't do criminal law. You wouldn't want him representing you. It wouldn't be your interest wouldn't be best served by a real estate attorney. So I think that part is clear.
Snoozy girl, I liked your comment. I didn't get the feeling that the attorney was the touchy-feely type. Not sure how much he could have done to help Brian's mental health. It's always good to have someone counseling you and in your corner, even if they, hold your hand while they're counseling you. That could help a little bit, and if they can advise you on what's going on and what you potentially could be facing. And I don't think he could do that from 1,500, 2,000 miles away. But, I could be wrong, but I think that's correct. Phil, another question.
Sure.
Will we ever find out what the cause of death was of Brian Laundrie through the anthropologist reports?
I think it's a possibility. There may be stuff going on that we don't know behind the scenes, like toxicology. If the skull was intact and the brain was present, DNA and toxicology could be recovered from that. It could be recovered from any tissue that's found on the body, or even bone samples. If there's any blood, things like that could tell us about toxicology. Again, you brought up whether or not there's going to be bite marks on bones or different things like that. And, we don't know what evidence could come forward or be recovered from the area of the Mayakahatchee Creek Reserve. So it's possible. And it's also possible that it gets classified as undetermined, meaning that we don't know. We'll never really know the cause of death. But I think that there's probably going to be a lot of examination, documentation, investigation of all of these different things that we're talking about. And once all of those, we call it investigative leads. Once all of the investigative leads have been exhausted, then they'll probably classify it as undetermined, if in fact it is undetermined.
Yeah, I think you're right. Folks, if you're not registered with us on YouTube, subscribe, please. Hit that subscribe button, ring that bell, give us a thumbs up, and join the Police Off the Cuff YouTube family. Another major question I have here, and I think a lot of people will have this. Will the Gabby Petito murder ever be solved? Will they ever be able to close this case based on even maybe circumstantial evidence? And is that even a possibility? Because that's what everyone wants to find out. And if they could prove a circumstantial case, and of course it's never going to go to court, but we spoke about this before. Police agencies close cases all the time based on the probability. And we in New York City would call that an exceptional clearance, where the evidence pointed so heavily to one person that we would clear the case exceptional clearance. Obviously, there's not going to be an arrest because the person that we think did it is dead. But in this case, is there any potential for something like that, an exceptional clearance? Because that would also open the door to what am I thinking, Phil? A civil case, right?
Okay.
For Gabby Petito's family to sue for wrongful death.
Sure.
Now that's a huge thing. But is there such a thing in Wyoming as a exceptional clearance? And I don't even know in New York City if that would clear the way for a civil case, because the lawyers could say, "Oh, how do you know? This doesn't prove my client did it 100%. You're using circumstantial evidence that was minus a court case. How can you prove this?"
Well, as far as the criminal case goes, Bill, I think that there's going to be enough circumstantial evidence unless there was some type of evidence recovered from her body indicating someone else's DNA or something to that effect, which I don't think is going to even be the case, although it's a possibility. But once all of the physical evidence is examined from her body, from the location where she was found, all of that, then you have whatever physical evidence was recovered inside the van that was taken from Brian's house when he drove back to Florida. You're going to have cell phone evidence that's going to place him in a location. If he, in fact, did have her phone, we believe he may have had her phone and answered text. So wherever her phone was, if we can almost prove that it was in his possession by the fact that he had his cell phone, and if they're both pinging in the same location, then that's going to be a good assumption if we can lock down the time of death being August the 27th or the 28th. You're going to have all the other things that precipitated the 27th and the 28th, which was earlier on the 27th. There was the argument inside the restaurant called the Piglet, where he became enraged, got into an argument with staff at the restaurant, stormed out or was asked to leave. She went back in hysterical crying, apologizing. And then you have all the way back to the 12th of August, where there was the Moab police body camera footage where they interacted with them on a domestic violence issue. So you're going to take all of these specific things and other things that we don't know about. We don't have privilege to the case folder. There may be other things. There may be much more evidence than we really know. One of the things I cited was video evidence from locations that he may have stopped on his way home. So if you put all of those things together, I think there's going to be enough what we would call an exceptional clearance. I don't know if they do that in the federal system or, like you said, in Wyoming, but I think that there probably will be, based on, all of the stuff that we already know and the stuff that we don't know.
Scotty Wagner, who I worked with in the 2-3 Detective Squad, just posted something. He said, I had an exceptional clearance that a civil case was made and the victim's family won. So it is possibility. It's a possibility, because I would think that the Laundrie family, the Petito family would love to get a civil case so that they could perhaps question Mr. and Mrs. Laundrie during the civil case and get the truth out of them. Like, I'm sure they know a lot of things that, look, when you looked at and I bring up the O.J. Simpson case, criminally he was cleared, but if you watch the civil case, they ate him up alive.
100%.
Because the rules of a civil trial are much different. It's not beyond a reasonable doubt. It's a preponderance of evidence, which is much easier to prove. Beyond a reasonable doubt is the prosecution has to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. Now think of preponderance of evidence. It's a whole different story.
Yeah, Billy, I'm glad you brought that up, because beyond a reasonable doubt, just let's look at that phrase, beyond a reasonable doubt. That means that you have to say there can't be anything else logical that could have happened to this person. So we're going to, say that they were guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. But now preponderance of evidence is a much lower threshold. You need 4 out of 6 jurors to rule in your favor to win a civil case. That's considered the preponderance of the evidence. It's more than 50%. It's 51% or more that will believe that, yes, this person is guilty of that crime. And I think the latitudes and the leeway that the court gives on civil cases is much greater. When you're testifying in a criminal trial, and especially a murder case, the judge keeps you in the lane of what you have to talk about. They don't allow you to talk about hypotheticals or what another person may be thinking, which would call hearsay. But in a civil case, I think the latitudes are a little bit wider, and they let you get in a little bit more regarding what happened in any specific case. And I think that there's probably a great chance there will be a civil case if the Petito family wants to go that route, because they can almost guarantee, based on the cell phone activity, that they were together. She went missing, and there's going to be all of the stuff that was done in the investigation that they can use as ammunition in the civil case. So, and I don't think it's going to be that hard to get 4 of 6 people on a civil case to rule in their favor based on what we know. And then there's the stuff that we don't know too. So I'm going to gamble and say, yeah, I think that they'd have a good shot at a civil case.
Phil, another good question, will the Laundries ever speak to the authorities?
Well, I mean, they don't have to at this point. Like we talked about a little bit earlier in previous episodes, we said that we believed, based on the attorney's Bertolino statements, that there was conversation between the FBI and the Laundrie family. And I think that those conversations may have been, if you cooperate with us, tell us where Brian is, or give us where Gabby's body is, we can work something out. I'm sure that negotiation was going on. I mean, what else would the FBI be talking to them about? Maybe it could be that they were, asking them for help in the search for Brian, since he was a missing person, and looked at he had an arrest warrant for the the credit card stuff. So I don't know. Maybe it was just stuff like that they were talking about. I doubt it. He made it seem like it was a little bit more in depth regarding conversation. And will they talk to them in the future? Unknown. I really don't know. But I think a good way to get them to talk would be through a civil trial. That's probably because you'll get them on this. You get them in depositions first, and you can depose them. They're on the oath. If they lie, and if you can prove they lie, they're guilty of perjury. So they'd have all the reason to not lie and tell the truth. So, but again, I don't know. It's hard to answer that question if they're ever going to speak to authorities. I would say almost 99% no.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. And I wanted to follow that question up. And because, again, we all know what happened because we're here. And, we all have 2020 hindsight, but we know that Brian is dead. Gabby is dead right now. And knowing that now, was the advice given by Stephen Bertolino, the attorney for the Laundries and Brian, the Laundrie family, and as well as Brian, was his advice to remain silent the best advice possible?
Yeah, that's really a tough one. I would think that had they not kept quiet, there's probably a good chance that Brian would still be alive, because he may not have gone into the wooded area, and whether he committed suicide or was killed by wildlife. So, I mean, I don't know. Listen, if Joe Murray was on the show, I know what he'd be saying. He'd be saying, no, he did everything right. He did invoke counsel. I get it. He didn't, you don't have the right to remain silent in the United States of America, and they exercise that right. I get it. But, we're looking at it from a different lens now, because we know what happened subsequent to that. So there are cases, and I've actually counseled on cases when I was retired, where a person was going to be looked at in a murder case, and they absolutely positively 100% did not do it. And I suggested strong cooperation with law enforcement, and then they were actually later asked to submit a photograph for a photo array, which would lead to a lineup, and it eventually did lead to a lineup. But the attorney on the case called me and asked me, he says, listen, they're asking for a photo. I don't have to give this photo. I said, listen, we've cooperated so far. 100% he didn't do it. He's made statements from the night of the murder. This is a couple of weeks later. All they're going to do is going to send detectives to lay in wait for him and take a picture of him and then put it in a photo array. So why would we stop cooperating? Now, turns out we cooperated fully. Most 99% out of 100, they don't do that. But in this particular case, the way things were working, I'm not going to get into the whole details of the case, but it actually worked out very well that the cooperation was there with law enforcement. Statement made, gave up the photo of himself to be in the photo array. They picked the photo array and said it was him. And then a lineup subsequent to that said that it wasn't him. So he was eventually cleared of the whole thing.
Photo Flies Photography. Carve it up, Bill and Phil. Great to be here tonight. We're happy that you are here with us, for sure.
We're carving it up.
Carving it up. Lisa Thompson.
That's a Giesler.
That's right. Term. What about the training exercise they had? Could that have been the FBI taking out Brian? Something fishy going on? I don't think so. I think
what do you think she's referring to, the training? I'm not getting that, Bill.
Early on, they did some big training exercises in the Myakkahatchee Preserve, but they were also the search was on. I mean, I can't imagine what it cost the Northport Police Department to do the level of search that they in fact did in the Myakkahatchee Preserve. I mean, they had helicopters, they had drones, they had all kinds of vehicles. They had those airboats that you see in the Everglades. So I think that they went all out, and I think it cost them a fortune. So I'm not buying any of the conspiracy theories of this. Look, is it possible that the FBI has a treasure trove of evidence and information that we are not privy to that makes the case even stronger against Brian Laundrie in regards to the murder of Gabby Petito? I believe they probably do have a lot more information that, in fact, we have no knowledge of because they're not going to release it. And now that there's never going to be a criminal case, they may have to turn it over to attorneys if there's going to be a civil case. And that may be the only way we ever find out the truth, if in fact there is a civil case that's levied by the Petito family.
I just want to make one comment on that, Bill, that just because he was never officially charged with the charge of murder in the Gabby Petito case doesn't mean that they weren't loaded and ready to do that. They had the charge for the credit card. I think that was just, I wouldn't call it a stall tactic. It was just a ploy to get him where he was wanted, and so that if he was spotted somewhere, he could be arrested and held. Anytime you've worked with prosecutors, Bill, and I know same thing with me, they like to move very slowly with these things, and they'll only pull the trigger on an arrest warrant for a homicide, or even to give you authorization to make the arrest on a homicide when they're satisfied with everything that's taking place. There wasn't a real long period of time here that this whole case had been going on. It seems like it was long, but when you think about it, toxicology could take 4 to 6 weeks. Different examination that was being done. I mean, they held Gabby's body for quite a long time. I know they did extensive exams, and that tells me that a lot of that stuff, telephone work, it all takes a lot of time. So they weren't the point being is they wanted to get hands on him. They wanted to have him incarcerated if they could get him alive, put him into jail, and wait for all of these different things to evolve. And then when the time, time is on your side, and you do the arrest warrant or you hit him with the charge of the murder. The point being, just because that never happened doesn't mean that the evidence wasn't there to proceed with a murder charge.
Atrelia, wait. She said, I guess it's just me, but if you're innocent, you should have no fear talking to law enforcement. Well, something in our country, the rights of those accused, you have the right to invoke counsel, and that's what he did. And we see it from both sides of the fence, being law enforcement and seeing the accused. If a law enforcement officer is in fact accused of a crime in the line of duty, you think he's going to go speaking to the district attorney without counsel? No, he's going to invoke counsel. So take that from where it's coming from,
just a little add on to that, Billy. If the police come to your door and they're asking you about if you've ever seen a missing person, you could fully cooperate with things like that. But if the police come to your door and they're asking you where you were on the night of the 12th and you were involved in a murder, it might be a good idea to call up Joe Murray and get some representation.
Sweet Melissa, can they hold Brian's parents responsible? They didn't kill Gabby. They just remained silent. That's their right. So can they be sued? Well, civilly, yeah, they can be civilly sued. And that they the laws in a civil case are much different than those in a criminal case. And they could sue them for the information that they believe they have in a wrongful death lawsuit. And
you know what, Billy, if there's some type of insurance that may extend, there's a thing called an umbrella policy. It could extend to Brian. He lived in the home. It could extend to Gabby if she lived in the home. Maybe obviously they would be suing the estate of Brian Laundrie if they feel he's the one that's responsible for the murder. Now, if the parents did something that they feel that they could tie them in and make them culpable for, his escape or aided his, his fleeing from justice, then they possibly could add them into the lawsuit. And I would think that, I don't know what kind of assets these people have, but you're usually going to want to go for an insurance company, an insurance policy, whether it be an umbrella or a homeowner's policy. And again, maybe there isn't a lot of assets, but I think that if you did it and you got to get them on the stand and talk, or you got them under oath in a deposition to talk, you might get the family might get some justification out of that,
100%. You know, one of the Phil, I want to get to this because we only have about 7 minutes left.
Okay.
And I want to get to this. How has this case, or has this case, put a spotlight on domestic violence?
Oh, I think it definitely did, based on that 1 hour and change video that they took from the Moab Police Department body cameras. Gisela had made a great point when she was on our show. She talked about how when she was in a situation, if somebody had just asked her the words, "Are you safe? Do you feel safe? Are you comfortable, being in the company of this person?" Now, I don't know that wasn't said to her. I don't think it was said in the video that was released. But so, yeah, I think there's definitely going to be going forward, people that law enforcement that are going to come into interaction with domestic violence cases. They may have this Gabby Petito case in the back of their mind and go the extra mile. And she also came up with a second thing, Gisela, that I credit her for. She said they maybe should have checked with Brian and Gabby the next day, which I think might have been another component that could have been helpful. I don't know if it would have been helpful in this specific case because she was killed weeks later, but maybe in another instance, if you get separated by the police and they don't make an arrest, but they separate you, and then the next day they check in on you, it sort of seems like they're following it up. And I think that if there was a abuser, he might think twice about doing something. Again, they were traveling, so I don't know if the dynamics of that specific case would have even worked out. They may have been gone in the morning, but those are two things that I think are good. And yeah, we can always learn from every case, and wherever there's room for improvement in law enforcement regarding domestic violence, I think that we should always put our best foot forward and try to do that.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that this definitely put a spotlight on domestic violence, and we said early on that we thought that the Moab police were professional. We thought they did a good investigation. Of course, what happened, they could never predict what happened or what was going to happen. I think that was October 12th that they had that they pulled them over. And I think that we
August,
said that,
not October. It was August.
I'm sorry, excuse me, August.
Yes,
yeah, August 12th. And August 27th, we believe was, or thereabouts, was
right.
the day or dates that we believed that Gabby was killed. So a full 15 days went by between that incident. And many people, of course, blaming the Moab police that if they had arrested either one of them, that would have prevented this. I don't know if that would have. I think, as we said, that we thought they were professional. But they're being put under a microscope now. In fact, I believe the department hired a private consultant to look into whether they in fact did a proper investigation. Sarah Claire, does the public have the right? Does the public have the right for answers from law enforcement? Do you think anything more of evidence will be released for public knowledge? The public does not have a right to obtain evidence that may be secret, or that the law enforcement entity may be keeping it under watch for a while. And I mean, you could see the FBI totally plays by that. They don't release anything. You could, of course, the press and several other entities they could file what's called a freedom of information law, and to try to get them to release it. But I've seen police departments, I've seen government agencies stall and still not release it after a FOIL release. So, Sarah, your answer is no, you don't have a right for an answer from law enforcement. And that's not under all circumstances. I think what you're talking about is for information from this case. And the press will file freedom of information because they want to know it. It's in their best interest. They want to give interesting broadcasts. They want to write interesting stories. And without the information, they can't possibly vet the information that they write about or put out there. I just want to say, guys, tonight at 10 o'clock, I'm going to be on the Ashley Banfield show. News Nation, I guess it's called. And talking about policing across the U.S. And I'm not the only one. I think there's two other talking heads. That's what you call it when you go on a TV show, you're a talking head,
Is that going to be a live episode, Bill? Is it going to be?
Yeah, it's live. Thank God I do this because I'm not nervous about going live at all, So,
sure.
but yeah, it's going to be live. And a couple of times I've been called on that show, and a couple of times they've canceled me at the last minute. So if that happens, don't call me a liar the next time you see me. I'm told I'm going to be on. If they say, "Oh, a hurricane hit," or a huge story happened, we're going to bump you to another time, which has happened to me a couple of times. I've been on it once so far. Actually, twice in one day, at 6 o'clock and 5 o'clock and 10 o'clock. So I should be on tonight at 10 o'clock if everything goes well. Phil, I still think that we'll probably come back and revisit this case because there's no finality to this. It's still a lot of things that are unanswered. So I thought it was a great conversation we had today. I think the folks in the chat enjoyed it. We have a lot of questions. We don't have a lot of answers, but sometimes questions give you answers. Phil, last thoughts.
I think that we covered a lot of the things. With regard to that last comment, real quick, with a FOIA request, a lot of times, I think all the information that the public is supposed to get is already gotten, like the name of the victim, things like that. When you do a FOIA request, a lot of times they redact it. So if there's something pertinent in there that's going to point the finger at somebody, they just black it out. They will leave in just, basic details like name, addresses, things like that of a victim, which become public record. Again, we've said this before, our condolences to Petito family. Hopefully they're able to, go on with their lives, and there may be other avenues for them to try and seek justice. Like Bill brought up, the civil end of this. I would think that at some point the law enforcement authorities are going to sit down with them, go over everything, give them whatever answers they can give them. And they're in our thoughts and prayers. Gabby Petito Foundation is a great charity. If you'd like to donate, it's on the internet, Gabby Petito Foundation. Bill and I have both donated some money to that, as well as other people around the podcast world. And we'll be back on it, I'm sure. Again, there'll probably be some other developments here and there, and we'll be right on it.
Folks, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you guys who are part of the Police Off the Cuff family. We really appreciate you guys. On behalf of myself, Bill Cannon, and my co-host, Phil Grimaldi, have a great night, everybody.
Stay safe, everyone.
One episode just ain't enough.